Hey everybody, welcome to this segment of Black Spring with Autumn on this Monday. And today we're basically going to deal with a little bit of a topic or an issue in which the Democrats and the radical liberals, progressives, are all feeling a bit of not the burn, but they're actually starting to feel the fear in which President Trump's administration has actually been successful with appointing a historic 220 judges to the Supreme Court. Now, by now, I'm sure you've heard of the Louisiana pro-abortion rally in which Chuck Schumer aimed his quote, "You won't know what hit you if you go forward with these awful decisions," at Justice Gorsuch and Kavanaugh. Now, these were remarks that came from a set of arguments that were being heard on the first abortion rights case. Now, which actually brings me to today's feature, and that particular feature is a bit threatening to the Democrats and the liberals, as well as of course, the UN agenda and their actual plans of accessibility of abortion for their New World Order agenda. So with that, if you don't mind, if you will go with me, I do have a source for you today from our vetted source, and that is the New American. Now, what we have here is that St. Paul City Council declares that, quote, abortion providers appreciation day, quote. Now, the St. Paul City Council unanimously approved a resolution declaring Wednesday, March 10th, quote, the Abortion Providers Appreciation Day in the Minnesota Capitol. Now, the resolution, which according to the St. Paul Pioneer Press, passed all Democrat council with, quote, no public discussion, end quote, claims, quote, abortion is one of the safest medical procedures in the United States, end quote. Pro-life advocates beg to differ. The National Right to Life Committee points out that while the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says abortion has an extremely low rate of serious complications, that, quote, there's no agreement among investigators as to what constitutes a major complication and no real national system for reporting these kinds of statistics, making the accuracy of these assertions questionable, end quote. Indeed, there is ample evidence that abortion is highly unsafe, notes the group. The City Council, by passing the resolution, aims to combat the stigma that many abortion providers and clinics staff face and to celebrate the courage, the compassion, and the quality care they provide, end quote. Dave Andrusko of the National Right to Life News suggested that in debating the resolution, quote, I'm guessing nobody mentioned, say, Kermit Gosnell. It'd be tacky to mention a man convicted of 3 counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of babies he consciously aborted alive and then sniped their spinal cords. And the 7 Democrats would probably be uncomfortable if anyone brought up Karnamaya Mongar, the woman who died at the hands of Gosnell's hideously unqualified staff. Nor, he writes, is it likely that the council members visited South Bend, Indiana for the recent burial of the remains of 2,411 babies that the late Dr. Ulrich Klopfer aborted and kept as trophies. End quote. And who would bring up or even remember the candor in which the senior director for medical services for the Planned Parenthood Federal Federation of America, PPFA, talked about fetal parts in an undercover video taken by the Center for Medical Progress, end quote. In fact, the only abortionist mentioned in the resolution is this late Dr. David Gunn, who was shot and killed in Florida on March 10, 1993, hence the date chosen for Abortion Providers Appreciation Day. Abortion providers, quote, are an essential and valued part of St. Paul's health care, end quote, the resolution reads, adding that they provide, quote, necessary health care, end quote. That is a difficult contention to defend given that the United States had some of the best health care in the world prior to the Supreme Court's 1973 invalidation of all state restrictions on abortion. In addition, leaders representing more than 30,000 American physicians signed an open letter last year declaring that abortion is never necessary, quote, and deliberately killing the unborn child by abortion is not health care, end quote. The potential overturning of Roe v. Wade is what really has the city council worried, and the timing of the resolution is meant to coincide with the court's hearing of a case challenging a Louisiana law requiring abortion doctors to have admitting privileges to nearby hospitals. Quote, the Supreme Court of the United States now contains a majority of justices who may not interpret the Constitution to provide protection for the right to end a pregnancy and may overturn or severely limit Roe v. Wade, end quote, frets the resolution. The council is so far left that it actually struck the word women from the original text and replaced it with patients. Elsewhere, it refers to, quote, all people who can become pregnant, end quote. Who wouldn't want to offend the transgender crowd, after all? The resolution also decries recently enacted abortion restrictions in other states and claims violence against abortion providers is increasing. The American Civil Liberties Union praised the resolution, while Republican State Senator Mark Johnson said it was indicative of moral decline occurring in Minnesota and across our country, end quote. But the most appointed and poignant comment on the resolution came from Barbara Seary of Lakeville, Minnesota. Referring to the number of unborn babies aborted each year in the land of 10,000 lakes, she wrote to the Pioneer Press, quote, I can think of 10,000 Minnesotans from the past year, plus 9,000 plus Minnesotans from the year prior, plus 10,000 plus Minnesotans from the year prior to that, etc., who will not be celebrating the St. Paul City Council's newly approved Abortion Providers Appreciation Day. Okay, so there you have this particular article that was written by Michael Tennant. And here again, I did mention in the opening of they're concerned about, of course, the overturning of Roe v. Wade. So I do believe we're going to see we will be seeing more radical responses. We'll be seeing more rallies. In fact, unfortunately, in the liberal state, violence, of course, may even come about because of these. We have a very immoral group of people that are serving in our Congress. I mean, to me, we have Chuck Schumer's behavior, you have the Nancy Pelosi's, you have all these figures who generally could be very well, they could be very well impeached. In fact, you have Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who looks to international law. None of these people their behavior alone could dethrone them or could destabilize their positions. They could be disbarred. They could be just because of their behaviors, but our Congress they are not doing their job by impeaching congressmen and congresswomen for behavior that's not acceptable. Chuck Schumer is no exception. Nancy Pelosi, no exception. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, her comments, she looks to international law. None of these people are being held to the standards of the Constitution. They're not upholding their oath of office. Meanwhile, when they attempt to falsely or unsubstantiatively impeach someone, all of a sudden they're constitutional custodians, which they are far from that. They talk about their democracy. Well, their democracy is not defined by the constitutional republic. We are not a pure democracy, and that's something that needs to be taught in schools. It's a civic responsibility for people to understand that this is not a pure democracy. Otherwise, the liberals just keep leading the narrative and leading the agenda that corrupts the youth and for generations to come. I mean, of course, we're talking about this is potentially a year of a boomerang. With the depth of the swamps, there's a lot of justice to potentially be delivered. And I do believe this administration will get that done. It's just going to be, it's a slow roll, it's it's going to trickle down, but you know, these things need to happen. And not to mention on a global scale, there's of course the UN Agenda 21, and of course the liberals being beholden to the globalists for, of course, the eugenics. I mean, the African American community, the black community has always been at the heels, been the baseline of eugenics. You know, your Margaret Sangers, you know, you have these plans have been in place for forever. You know, African American community, the black community is a rough 13% of the population with 20 million babies aborted. You know, they are pushing abortion as health care. Now, wherever you are on the issue, late term abortions. I mean, last January, you know, the state of New York extended the capabilities on the provisions on abortion, late term abortion. That also brought Governor Northam into the firestorm. And his comments, I paraphrase, you know, keeping the baby comfortable until the mother decides what she wants to do with this child. So there again, ladies and gentlemen, you have